Welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church's in-person and online worship this morning. I'm glad that you're all here, whether you're here in the building here at 524 Allen Avenue, or you are in the comfort of your own home sanctuary joining us this morning. Allen Avenue UU Church's mission calls us to celebrate diversity, encourage spiritual growth, and promote social responsibility while we travel on and care for the earth. If you are new today, please see the back of your order of service. There's a scan for the welcome form if you'd like to fill that out, or go to the website, or look in the chat box. We'd love to know more about you and connect with you. The Share the Plate for February is Sexual Assault Response Services of Southern Maine, which provides free services in York and Cumberland counties to anyone affected by sexual harassment, sexual abuse, or sexual assault through prevention programs, support, education, and advocacy. We have a special program happening in the Portland area this week. Through the Portland Public Library website, you'll find a link for Troy Moon, who is on our Board of Trustees, and he'll be facilitating a discussion about the sustainability plan for Portland. And that's Wednesday night, 5:30 on Zoom, and you can find that link on the Portland Public Library website. We hope you'll hang out following the service for a little conversation, although there's no coffee for those of you who are here. So a little Benny for you at home if you have coffee. I'm so glad you've joined us, and we will center ourselves with the sound of the bell. Our call to worship words are those of the Reverend Gretchen Haley. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes, and forwarded emails as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet to bring our way. And as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we'd thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour, we gather to surrender to mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already, here and now. Come, let us worship together. Our chalice lighting words are those of Martha Nussbaum. The condition of being good is that it should always be possible for you to be morally destroyed by something you couldn't prevent. To be a good human is to have a kind of openness to the world, an ability to trust uncertain things beyond your control. These things that are beyond your control that can lead to be shattered in the very extreme circumstances for which you were not to blame. That says something very important about the human condition and of the ethical life that is based on a trust in the uncertain and on a willingness to be exposed. It's based on being more like a plant than a jewel, something rather fragile but whose very particular beauty is inseparable from its fragility. May the light of our chalice this morning illuminate that kind of beauty. I invite you now into the spirit of prayer or meditation, as is your practice, continuing with the words of Martha Nussbaum. Being human means accepting promises from other people and trusting that other people will be good to you. When that is too much to bear, it is always possible to retreat into the thought, I'll live for my own comfort, for my own revenge, for my own anger, and I just won't be a member of society anymore. That really means I won't be a human being anymore. You see, people doing that today, where they feel that society has let them down, and they can't ask anything of it, and they can't put their hopes on anything outside themselves. You see them actually retreating to a life in which they think only of their own satisfaction, and maybe the satisfaction of their revenge against society. But the life that no longer trusts another human being and no longer forms ties to the political community is not a human life any longer. May the space of silence that we create together be large enough to hold all of our stories. I invite you now into a moment of silence.
The reading this morning is Into the Morning by Heather Kahn, who is a local poet and artist. She notes that it is inspired by the Spanish poem De conocer que el río es una espada by Roberto Poirot, which according to Google translates as not knowing that the river is a sword. Into the morning. Do we really believe that things dream their proper dreams, that we yearn for what we should desire, that we fall in love in the correct season which has been laid forth for love? Do we believe that we can rescue ourselves from the dark oceans because we think we are good at navigation, or good at recognizing the stars in the dark, or good at finding our way? Which are all ways of saying there is something that I know and that makes the world a tiny bit more safe for me. It is together that the world becomes a tiny bit more safe. It is our sharing of knowledge that helps us continue this race to the end of days without sliding from the face of the mountain where the ice has encircled the stone and the earth to make the dangerous path unfit for our wandering. There are 1,000 pages of knowledge that I have set in the heart of me to make our world safer. Let me write these poems again and again to all of you so that you can profit from the glimmers of understanding that I hold out of the deep places of the earth and water. I do not know very much about wisdom, but I am trying to learn how to carry it from the night into the morning.
Allen Avenue is a place of shared wisdom, a community created by your participation, your ideas, and your financial support, which supports the mission of this congregation, and also a portion of the just general giving today will go to the sexual assault program here in our community. Your contributions will now be gratefully received.
Good morning. Many of you don't know me, and you may be wondering what I'm doing here. And I'll answer that two ways. First, what am I doing at A2U2? My wife, Bev Riola, and I moved to Portland from St. Louis in the summer of 2019, about 8 months before COVID shut everything down. In St. Louis, I was a member of the Ethical Society, part of a small, non-creedal, humanist religious movement with a firmly secular orientation. UU is the closest thing to it around here. I checked out the two local UU churches and decided that A2U2 was a better fit. Second, what am I doing here, standing in front of you this morning? Well, at an open mic last summer, I delivered a satirical talk about how I was going to write a self-help book and make a mint with a book titled How to Be Unhappy. Donna heard it and decided that qualified me to help her with the service. She approached me initially and asked me to help with the service and said, "Oh, it can be anything. You could just do the reading or something like that." And yet somehow, by the end of the process, with her encouragement and support, here I am delivering the reflection. Unitarian Universalism is a big tent holding many perspectives and experiences, and we all belong here together. Today, I share from my own perspective and experience. I don't know how many of you know this. I didn't. But Soul Matters has suggested monthly themes. This talk was originally supposed to be given next month, and when Donna told me the March theme is renewing faith, I thought, well, that should be interesting, because to a materialist like me, faith is an F word. Of course, faith doesn't have to encompass belief in a god or gods or supernatural things, or an animating spirit of nature, or whatever. It has ordinary meanings. I have faith the sun will rise tomorrow. I have faith I can get a wonderfully tasty and awfully bad for me donut later today at Dunkin'. But this is trivial, cheating, just a way of saying you believe in physical law or a continuation of a pattern. Especially in a church, you would expect faith to carry the usual religious meaning of a belief in things unseen or unprovable. Perhaps it would be useful to recap my journey to faithlessness. I was raised Methodist. By the time I came along, the Methodists had become a mainline liberal Protestant denomination. Further, the 60s were a liberal time. I really don't have any bad memories of my religious upbringing. So I'm not one of those ex-Christian atheists angry at Christianity and still working through issues left over from a fear and guilt-ridden upbringing. At least I don't think I am. In 7th grade, when Methodists are confirmed, I'm believed at all. I remember praying hard for God to spare a friend of the family who was dying of lung cancer. She smoked and was, I'd guess, in her 40s. Her youngest was a classmate of mine. Of course, she died in short order. I don't know how much of an effect that had on my faith journey, but I put it forward as evidence that my journey away from faith was not an entirely intellectual one. What I do know is that as I learned more about science and how well it explained life, the universe, and everything, I quickly moved away from conventional belief. By 9th grade, I believed that God had created the universe and the laws by which it operated, and then, as I put it at the time, sat back to watch the show. I later learned that this was essentially deism. Much later, I realized that the deist prime mover is an untestable hypothesis, and dropped that idea too. The 60s and 70s also saw a huge revival in paranormal and spiritual beliefs, generally characterized as New Age. I was an avid reader of Martin Gardner's column in Scientific American and Skeptical Inquirer magazine, which debunked beliefs in the healing power of crystals, the potent effect of pyramids, faith healing scams, runways of the gods, UFO visitations, alternate cosmologies, and so forth. The lesson I drew from all this is that there are natural or human explanations for the putatively supernatural and extraterrestrial. I also took to heart the maxim that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. My position is that any supernatural claim is an extraordinary one. And it is on the one making the claim to provide the extraordinary, reproducible, incontrovertible evidence. Until then, I ain't going to believe it. And it is certainly not my job to prove it wrong. To this day, I remain unimpressed with supernatural or spiritual overlays grafted onto nature. To take just a few examples of things that were popular over the last few decades, the strong anthropic principle, which posits that it's no accident that physical constants are arranged just so that a physical universe is possible and we can evolve to appreciate that fact. It's just the old deist prime mover in new clothing. The more teleological versions of the Gaia hypothesis, which basically assert the biosphere is a sort of distributed intelligence, go way beyond the science. And while I find paganism's reverence for nature useful in raising an ecological consciousness, I see no reason to believe in pagan deities. To take a recent example of the human desire to impose meaning on nature, look at how Susan Simard's groundbreaking work on forest ecology somehow turned into the secret life of trees, the more radical interpretations of which seem to imply that trees actively, consciously cooperate with each other. Why is it not enough that mindless, undirected natural selection could result in such a sophisticated system? To me, that explanation is both sufficient and really cool. Ms. Khan's poem reminds us the world is a scary and dangerous place. We don't like that we're really not in control, and that so much depends on random accidents and coincidence. And so I think we invent beings or other beliefs to assuage our terror. For similar reasons, I'm unimpressed by coincidence. Often I've heard someone relate a remarkable experience and conclude, God was speaking to me, or the universe was trying to tell me something. Once, I was bopped on the head by an acorn. You really heard. Was God punishing me for my apostasy? Or was it because I walked under a solid phalanx of oak trees for 2 blocks, twice a day, 5 days a week, to and from a bus stop? You do that for 39 years, and sooner or later, you're going to get bopped. You might even say I was asking for it. Now, don't get me wrong. I know from personal experiences, coincidence can be emotionally powerful. And a couple in my life have caused me to stop and reassess or reprocess some emotional event. But I think that's what's happening here is that you or your subconscious or whatever you want to call it was uncomfortable or unhappy about something, and it seized on one of thousands of random, meaningless things that happen to you every day as a way of bringing the issue to the surface. Lest you think I lead an emotionally dead life, cynically viewing all as mechanical and meaningless, let me assure you there is joy and awe and love in my life. Like more spiritual people, many of my peak experiences are associated with nature, and not necessarily extraordinary or exotic nature. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. It's about as ordinary nature as you can get. Yeah, flat, people say. Two things I miss about it are that flatness, specifically the horizon and the night sky. You can't see very far in the city. The view is blocked by buildings and trees. You have to find some high ground for a long view. Growing up, I thought nothing of being able to see my friend's house a mile away, or of being able to stand and enjoy a beautiful sunset, unobstructed, spread wide and high across the western horizon. Or watching thunderstorms come in from miles and miles away, the tall thunderheads glistening in the sun, lightning popping off like flashbulbs within them, trailing veils of rain, blotting more and more of the western sky until they blot out the sun and the storm is upon you. I miss being able to walk outside on any clear moonless night, turn off the yard light, and see the Milky Way. The night sky still impresses me. Sometimes when I'm driving through the country at night, I'll pull off the highway, go down a gravel road, park on a field access, and get out to look at it. Bev always complains I'm going to get the car stuck in the mud. But to me, it's worth the risk. Here, modern science actually increases my awe. I'm sure the ancients were impressed by the night sky. After all, the stars were out of reach. But now we know our Earth is a speck of dust, orbiting an ordinary sun, one of 100 billion in a vast galaxy. A galaxy which is one of billions in an incomprehensibly vast universe. Strangely, this does not make me feel insignificant or worthless. Rather, it increases my awe at the vastness of the universe, while simultaneously appreciating the irony of being awed by a universe that doesn't give a damn what I think about it. And what about love, you might ask? Do I really think love is just chemistry? No. I think love is wonderful chemistry. But back to the topic, the F word, or rather, renewing the F word. My background is engineering and applied mathematics. I'm sure most of you suffered through high school geometry. You may remember there were starting points called postulates. I'll admit I had to look them up for this talk. It's been a long time. They're pretty basic. I mean, the first three are you can draw a line segment between 82 points. That line segment can be extended in infinite distance both ways, and all right angles are congruent. There are only a few, and starting with some definitions and those few assumptions, you can derive all the theorems of Euclidean geometry. Back in 1931, Kurt Gödel, a logician and mathematician, formally proved the pretty intuitive idea that you have to start somewhere with some sort of formally unprovable assumptions. In other words, even in geometry, you have to take some things on faith. In mathematics, a set of postulates is good if it leads to interesting, non-contradictory, non-trivial, maybe even useful results. Given that we have to start somewhere, what postulates lead to a useful, good, whatever that is, philosophy to live by? As humanists, religious or secular, we postulate the inherent worth and dignity of humans. We believe all should be able to exercise moral autonomy and should be provided with conditions in which they can thrive. From that, it follows that human are, in some sense, taken as a whole, good, and will naturally want to move toward such a society. I will now take you back to November 9th, 2016. It is the day after Donald Trump was elected president. I took the day off work. My excuse was I'd stayed up late following the election results, which I had, but the real reason was I simply couldn't face my co-workers. As it happens, I was taking Witnessing Whiteness, a facilitated discussion group on race issues, and we had a regularly scheduled meeting that Wednesday. We threw out the curriculum and basically spent 2 hours crying and asking ourselves, what happened? We were bewildered, and some of us were, frankly, terrified. Talk about shaking my belief in the goodness of people. How could so many vote for such an obviously damaged person to lead us? Talk about shaking my belief in American pragmatism, which teaches that though we can never know ultimate truth, we can approach it, or at least find a truth that works for us, through public discussion and debate. Talk about shaking my belief in popular democracy, which pragmatism teaches is the best system for facilitating that debate. Now, realistically, there will be diversions, dead ends, failed experiments, steps backward. But honestly, this was a pretty serious detour, thank you very much. How does one renew one's faith after a shock like that? Well, the next 4 years. The Women's March, the largest peaceful demonstration in our history. The revival of the Black Lives Matter movement and the associated honest discussion of racism. A free press uncovering uncomfortable facts. The 2018 midterms. In 2020, I watched the polls for the League of Women Voters and was heartened by the patience and good cheer of the voters as they waited outside for up to an hour in sub-freezing weather. And though 74 millions voted for that damaged human being, 81 millions voted him out. Although our governmental institutions were bent, they did not break, thanks to the courage and ethics of people within those institutions. It turns out I do have faith in a thing unseen and unprovable. I believe we will make it better. A couple centuries ago, if you lived in a city, chances were between 1/3 and 1/2 of your children would die before the age of 5. That is no longer true. A couple centuries ago, life expectancy was about 40 years. Today, we are healthier, live longer, and many more people than ever are able to live fulfilling, meaningful lives. A couple centuries ago, democracy was uncommon and limited. A couple centuries ago, the idea that people had rights existed in only a few places, and only if you suitably limited the definition of people. Today, we have a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and even if it is honored mostly in the breach, it still exists as an inspiration for people around the world. I know that extrapolating beyond the data is a logical fallacy, and yet I believe that in the long run, we will make it better. There is a thin line between celebrating progress and complacency. We must remember improvement won't come unless we work for it. We must all get out in the public square and advocate for the truth as we see it with both word and deed. Because, as Heather Kahn wrote, it is together that the world becomes a tiny bit more safe. It is our sharing of knowledge that helps us continue this race to the end of days. Working together, we can move society toward a new consensus that better respects the inherent worth, dignity, and moral autonomy of all, and work toward a world where all can thrive. And we must do so with faith that our efforts will make a difference. Amen.
Thank you, Jim. Dale, choir, our tech team, and our Zoom hosts, and all of you for being here to create this community together. Our closing words are those of the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Most of us recognize this kind of moment, the hope of finally blossoming after holding our lives tight in a bud. We respond with yes, despite no new evidence, no change in fact or circumstances. We follow it through. This is faith.